Hi, David Toulis. Our show is newgonomics.com. We cover local economy and free markets every day from 1 to 3 here at the Copperhead Station, the little station that could, not a corporate giant, not a big media player, but an independent and locally owned, locally operated media service to the public. I was talking with a potential host for one of our coming shows, and I pointed out that we believe in public service. We believe in serving you, the listener. And are we going to charge this man to have a show every day on our station? No. Why not? Because he's providing you a service. So what we want to do is to incentivize him and a co-host so that they can make partial livings. He's a businessman. He can make a partial living if he wants to, selling advertising on his show. And we provide a service for you and make it possible to have the best kind of local-centric programming. My name is David Toulis, and we have a lot to get to today. One of the things I want to explore is further discussion of the deep state concept. Now, that word was first applied that I know of as regards Turkey, and it has kind of caught on among the libertarian intelligentsia and others, of course. And one of the things I want to look at is if a particular deep state argument is likely, what is the solution to the deep state's interest in the collapse that's building? There's pressure brewing in the economy, in the credit-based economy, and how will it respond? In other words, how will the actors behind the actors respond? And will they make sacrifice? Where will the sacrifices come to make things more in balance? And the solution, I dare say, comes not from the reading that I've done directly, but it comes just from my own thinking about how the national economy works and how it is really unpredictable, though there are principles of operation which I think are worth considering. And these questions come out of morality. They are questions of right and wrong. What is just and what is unjust? And if we have a perspective that has a law center that stands on a concept of law or equity, then I think we can understand how certain evil things, if you will, bad things, certain crashes in the equities and in other marketplaces will come, and they are really necessary. They are very important that they happen. And my hope is for you that you will have a perspective that allows you to understand how these things might come about, even though our show is not really about the marketplace, it's not really about business, it's about the ideas that underlie the marketplace. And what happens when men's systems, by cartels, by legal tender laws, by monopoly power, by the use of force in the marketplace, how distortions come to be built into the economy, and how these distortions at some point have to be liquidated. They have to be washed away. They have to be soaked up, if you will. And so we have to. And these are the economic analysis that I offer is I would say it's theoretical. And even so, even though it's not just a discussion of business headlines, I do hope it to be of value to you. And since we are here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, my goal is to point you to valuable stories in the local press, which are suggestive or helpful. There's one by a young woman journalist that wrote a story in the Sunday Chattanooga Times Free Press that I'm holding in my hands. The headline is "Fight for Independence," about locally owned, locally operated pharmacies. She has on the front of D section, business section, she has a little graphic that really kind of surprised me, and as to the number of pharmacies that are independent. In Tennessee, she says, there are 555 independent pharmacies, 418 chain, 222 supermarket-based pharmacies, and 244 mass merchants. So it's about 2 to 1 locally owned, locally operated versus the national players. and I thought there would be many fewer independent pharmacy desks around the state, but there are. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised, and her deck, her subhead is Independent Pharmacies Focus on Local Ties to Battle Competitors' Cost-Cutting Benefit Managers. And some of the local names are in the story, and it's good to read Shelley Bradbury's work in the Chattanooga Times Free Press. I've got the printed version here. Of course, I believe in newspapers. I believe in having the printed page in my formerly ink-stained fingertips to have folded up in my briefcase with my other papers, right? But Kingwood Pharmacy is in East Ridge. That's mentioned. Access Pharmacy, run by Brad Standifer here in Hickson, not too far from our studio. And Ledford RX Pharmacy in Lafayette is mentioned also. And the great threat to the independent pharmacy, to local economy as it comes to the world of pharmacopoeia, is the benefits manager. And the story quotes some of the interviewees in this direction. These are called prescription benefit managers, PBMs for short. And what they do is they sort of rationalize purchases of drugs and payments for drugs and the delivery of them from the doctor to the patient. And their operation is, of course, national economy centered. It's the mass system. The largest one is called Express Scripts, which Shelley Bradbury reports is pulling in $94 billion in revenue. Her figure is 2013. It's the largest one in the country. So the small shop that's run by a man who may be incorporated, these businesses could be LLCs or S-corps, or maybe one or two may be sole proprietorships. But the PBMs are the great danger to the small outfit. And she explains, Shelley Bradbury does in the Times Free Press, she explains that there's no out. If you run a pharmacy like Brad Standifer over at Family Access or Access Family, you can't not deal with a company such as Express Scripts. That and I think one of the interviewees says that 90% of his orders go through such an organization. PBMs are the middlemen between insurers and patients, the story says. The multi-billion-dollar companies set reimbursement rates, establish insurers' accepted pharmacy networks, and decide which drugs are preferred and which aren't. The companies collectively handle prescription drug benefits for more than 216 million Americans, according to the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association. That's from the Times Free Press, the Sunday edition. Those reimbursement rates have dropped to barely livable reimbursements, local independent pharmacists say. A quote here from Mason Ledford, who runs the Ledford RX Express Pharmacy in Lafayette. Every day we'll lose money on some prescriptions. It's difficult because you want to provide good care, everything the patient needs, but then you'll get reimbursed so low at a rate you can't hardly afford. There's a lot of soul searching that has to go on. In other words, in the direction of, should I stay in local economy? Should I run my local economy shop with my family, waiting for me, trying to make livings, trying to pay our light bills and our car insurance payments, and maybe a mortgage, based on a line of trade where many of the sales cannot be done profitably, because effectively what's happened here is there's a socialization of the marketplace, right? You have gigantic players, corporations, and they control. You are just a helpless individual vis-a-vis a gigantic system that pulls in $90 billion in revenue a year, and so it sets the terms and you comply. It is a sort of subservience of the local pharmacist desk as against the national giant. There are photographs in here. One is of pharmacist Phil Talley, who works at a little place called Fred's in Chickamauga. It says he recently sold Chickamauga Drugstore to Fred's and moved with several employees into its pharmacy. So again, another challenge to local economy is the gigantic player who sets prices. And like the government, right? The government sets prices for things often way too low to be unprofitable. If you have a mother or a father, a senior citizen in Medicare, you will come to find that your parent is a low-level, a non-desirable kind of patient. Doctors are so stung and patronized over by the system that they start looking at old people who need care as just burdens. They view them as administrative nightmares that often don't bring any revenue with which to support their own practices. Local economy is this paradigm of the giant sort of oppressing the small, and they're not being a broken up marketplace, but rather a gigantic marketplace with a few gigantic players. That is the whole idea. That is the whole picture of national economy. And of course it's done, the story indicates, for the purpose of keeping prices low for the patient. And that's what, of course, that's what Walmart does. But as it driving in that direction, when the monolith pushes prices, seeks to have consumer prices low, it of course is seeking its own huge profits, and I'd say it's not really right, and it would be better if there were many national players that competed, to which the local pharmacists could go to make their own arrangements. In other words, the local pharmacist then has more influence in the marketplace than if he works simply with 2 or 3 of the giant PBMs. And that's the theory of our show. And I think it bears repeating that in many ways, local is better than remote, and simple is better than complex, and personal is better than corporate, and near is better than far. And our national economy has grown so much in the direction of the things that are less desirable and less good that I think if we have a Nooga-centric perspective, a loco-centric perspective, we can better see the problems. And I think what I'm trying to encourage you to do, my listener here at Copperhead 1240 on our show Nooganomics.com, is to find a way of having multiple revenue streams in your own affairs, in your own finances. You have a job, your wife has a job, she's not able to be home, you have 2. But both are vulnerable. One of you is with a national business, right? You have withholding, you have a 12% tax on your wages since you're in the official economy. And there are vulnerabilities you face being subject to limited supply of income and national players. What can you do independently to have another source of income, to provide value for people in a new way, maybe in a new, completely new area? That's one of our arguments, that you need to start something new. It's something that you're not going to hear from the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce in Chattanooga has, especially at the foundation, I think the Chamber of Commerce Foundation that oversees these gigantic new arrivals and lobbies for these new arrivals, such as Volkswagen, its perspective is really there is no other way. In other words, there is no other way than to have the gigantic profit exporting company land here. And there's not really an emphasis that I can discern by sifting the press in having every Chattanoogan start his own little business. We need to have thousands of new businesses start in Chattanooga as the great meltdowns arrive. Because I think if you do have one more income stream, you're going to be more secure and more mobile. You'll have pared back some of your debts, I hope, and you can better secure the future. You may even have money to put one child through college. If you think that that's a good idea, you'll have, if you have another income stream and kind of rationalize your life better, perhaps you will be in a better situation as the great tide of red washes across Chattanooga, down Main Street, down McCauley, and down Broadway, as if it were a flood. These things are coming. They are, in my mind, they are inevitable. One resource, a couple of resources to mention just right off the bat here, and that's Bruce Krebs. He runs the Entrepreneur Source, which is a little business that connects you with the franchise world. There is a franchise for you, one fitting your time availability, your capital, your savings, the means you have of getting help within your family, let's say, in your little business. Bruce Krebs is at 875-5621. That's 875-5621. And another help is on 2 points, tax time and also financial advice. Call Eric Pelton. He runs E.J. Pelton Company. That's at ejpelton.com. The number is 622-3156. That's 622-3156. He does tax returns. If you are subject and liable to file a tax return, he will help you with that. He also does books for businesses. He does individual tax returns, individuals' books. And if you are the Nuganomics.com listener that needs advice, call him and ask for an interview. He's got a Saudi Daisy office, and the number I gave you is for the Brainerd Road office. Well, one of the things I read this morning was from a favorite economist, Gary North, and his discussion is about the remnant of people who realize that major changes are not going to come out of conservative, free market oriented think tanks in the Washington area. He talks about the influence that Ron Paul had on the libertarian world, on the free market world, and the influence that the internet has had on breaking through the monopoly controls on ideas, on media. He says that Ron Paul was the only man we ever had in Washington who was the incarnation of Albert J. Nock's principle of the remnant. The remnant found him. He did not seek it. He says that, Ron Paul was one of three very important men in the world of ideas. And they were not at the center of power. Though Ron Paul was in the Congress, he always voted no, and he had no official influence, but he had tremendous influence, and even more now that he's not in Congress and is operating the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. A similar figure, according to North, is Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett's dad, who served in the Truman era. And the third one was Larry McDonald, the Georgia congressman. He was a representative of the John Birch Society and worked with Ron Paul. And Gary North got a job with Ron Paul in 1976 because McDonald told him that I was available. McDonald had no illusions of being able to persuade anybody in the Democratic Party of the legitimacy of his sort of anti-interventionist views. His views ceased to be published when Korean Airlines Flight 007 disappeared. And what North is writing about is how you shouldn't be supporting think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation in Washington because they are trying to be influential. They are trying to be influential politically as opposed to in the area of ideas. In his essay, which I went to GaryNorth.com to read it, but it's available at the most famous libertarian free market website in the world, and that is LouRockwell.com. He also mentions Leonard Read, who founded the free FEE, the Free Enterprise. The Foundation for Economic Education, which publishes the Freeman, and he's Leonard, and there's a local economy point I'm trying to get to here. Forgive me for not making it clear as I go, but Reed was not willing, North says, to compromise in order to get pieces of legislation through Congress. He believed that the greater good would be served by publishing a small monthly magazine, the monthly newsletter called Notes from FEE, and holding small seminars. He never deviated from his position, and he died in 1983. Ronald Reagan read the Freeman, and so did Ron Paul. And Hans Sennholz is another writer whose name you need to know, who is a free market libertarian writer who taught at Grove City College. And North points out, again, in the direction of the remnant, people who understand that ideas really matter. And he says sometimes around 1990, Senholz was in a line of people to shake hands with former President Reagan. When he got to the front of the line, he introduced himself. Instantly, Reagan turned to his wife. "Nancy, this is Professor Senholz." Then he said to Senholz, "I have been reading your articles for years." It should be noted that Reagan wrote most of his own speeches in the years before he became president. So here was an unknown professor teaching at an unknown college and writing for an almost unknown magazine that was published by an unknown think tank 26 miles from New York City. Ronald Reagan knew exactly who he was. This was Knox's principle of the remnant in action. And so another remnant player, he says, is Lew Rockwell, who helped found the Mises Institute at a little southern university in Auburn, Alabama, Auburn University. And Rockwell is in charge of Rothbard's papers and has been publishing some of his work. And so the remnant is now having more of a say. And North rightly attributes this great gain for the free enterprise idea to the web, where many books are available for free, many books are available online. There's no reason anyone has to go to a university to study economics, unless he wants an official piece of paper that says that he did that, and is now $90,000 or $130,000 poorer for having done so. You can, if you want to study something, you can read on your own. And the idea, of course, is that the idea of being self-taught is that it's much more possible now. And what we have to do is shift away from accrediting institutions to accrediting people. So how can your son be accredited as having read 15 free market books? Well, these are this comes back to some person. Maybe there's a person you know who has a credential of some kind, and he credentials your son as having read these books and written 5 papers about them. So you see what's happening. The educational marketplace is shifting, and the remnant, if you understand what I'm saying, is the individuals who are not widely known, but who are influential because they deal with one person at a time. In my case, I'm not influential, but I think in terms of the remnant as well. My whole idea of neweconomics.com is to not to be popular, not even to be famous, but to have you, my listener, think along with me. Provisionally, we're penciling in, you might say, a kind of early history of Chattanooga, of Hamilton County, of the marketplace here where we live. This is a rough draft. We are speculating. Yes, we are speculating, and we realize that the ideas of liberty and important movements are never from a mass. They never involve a mass. The mass always follows major events. They follow major ideas. But what's important is that there be individuals, men like you, my listener, a man of modest means, a commoner, a yeoman like me, right? We have influence in our spheres of acquaintance, in our spheres of friendship, and we raise questions. We ask the right questions of our friends. We act kind of as a remnant, not thinking that we have to be in Washington to have great effect. We can have great effect just being here in Chattanooga, an obscure little southern town on a river that has a bit of a reputation as an ecological stronghold, and it has the gig, right? Well, my name is David Toulis. Our show is neweconomics.com. We've got a lot to get to, and my cup runneth over. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. We're going to talk about the deep state and who's going to pay the price as the deep state, it is suggested, is going to try to make things so that it can survive, because that's all it cares about, its own survival.
Sprint Cup Series is on the Motor Racing Network. Coverage continues Sunday here at Live on the Motor Racing Network, the voice of NASCAR. As for ticket information, go to mrn.com.
Check it out this Sunday live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station, Copperhead 1240. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on the 2014 Camry. This is unheard of. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a new 2014 Camry. But you have to get to Capital Toyota on Lee Highway. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on the 2014 Camry. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway, with a savings that much better.
When your loved one dies, we in the South say he's passed, gone to another place. She left us here. Death is so much more than a trying time, but we have to deal with it. You want a funeral home that helps you get through your ordeal. You want a professional, but not one who lacks warmth or sincerity. I'm Josh Jerry. That's what I offer at Hamilton Funeral Home and Cremation Services in Hickson. Care for you. A local owner and operator who keeps your funeral costs down. A great place in which to remember, even celebrate the life of the one who's gone. Just call me, 531-3975. This is Josh. Again, the number is 531-3975. Hamilton Funeral Home. Oh, one more thing. Love your neighbor. Buy local.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important.
not
Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as duct busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable duct busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
Hi, my name is Bruce Krebs with the Entrepreneur Source. I help people who want to be self-employed. I help my clients through a very fact-based and analytical process to understand all the criteria that's important to them. I then help them look at franchises or businesses that fit their criteria. Once my clients find the right opportunity, I help them find the best way to finance the business, including paying themselves through the startup phase. If you're just curious to understand the types of businesses that may be right for you, please call me for a free assessment. My phone number is 423-875-5621.
With recent changes out of Washington, turn to E.J. Pelton Tax Service for help. Professional advice, confidential service, fair prices, someone to trust all year long. Call 332-3339. These are tax professionals, and they're waiting to serve you. Visit us at 10327 Dayton Pike in Saudi Daisy, across from the fire hall. Another office is on Brainerd Road. We guarantee our work. Call 332-3339. Online at ejpelton.com. Think ahead.
Get the latest
You
news
mentioned
and
Jesse
information
Ventura.
now on
He's
our Twitter account.
he's off the grid now, hiding from
That's
drones.
Hot News
Oh, boy.
Radio. For the latest
That'll
news
work
and
out.
information, go to
There's no
Hot
such thing
News
as infrared
Radio.
after all.
That's twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News Radio is a service of
I've got too much to talk about.
Well, that's a good thing.
All right, David Toulis here. Did you hear about Jesse Ventura saying he's going off the grid, the former governor, the military strongman, and the man who suspects everything from the HARP connection with chemtrails to the growth of the security state at every front, and who's got a lot of suspicions. I think his suspicions about the good people are often very much on the mark. Though in his presentation, one has to be aware that there's a great deal of marketing. It's not just the facts. There's a very American way of telling the story. Well, he's gone off the grid. In the Washington Times, there's a mention of him. He tells Politico, "I'm off the grid. I move about with my TV show so that the drones can't find me, and you won't know exactly where I am." We just have to really appreciate him. There's also a story at GodfatherPolitics.com which has a story that seems to rebut a story that came out in the past day or two in the Atlantic. The Atlantic Monthly's website says that the gun rights movement has its strongest point of origin in recent history in the Black Panthers. And it's a long story. I just kind of read juicy parts as I went down it. Opposing that, if you will, or making a counterpoint to that narrative, is the Godfather Politics, a story about black leaders defending the NRA. There's a quote from the Reverend William Owens, who is the founder of God, Guns, and the Constitution, and he says, "The administration is far from the truth. The agenda is becoming more and more obvious to all that it's a distraction. It's a reason, an excuse to carry out an ideology that is more evident every day, every week that goes by, that it is anti-American. And when you touch the Second Amendment, you can't become more anti-American because America would not be without her guns, and guns would not be necessary without her God. And then he calls upon men of all races, all parties, to agree upon this. Without God, without guns, without the Constitution, America's end will come with haste. For when they change our Constitution, they will take our guns. And when they take our guns, they will also seek to take our God. That's when America will fight back. Well, that's a black minister. And if you look online for him, his name is Reverend William Owens, and he has an understanding of Christianity that touches, you might say, that touches the tarmac, as opposed to the kind of Christianity which is very common among people you probably know, you my listener, whose Christianity is really something just between their ears. It is a subjectivized, privatized religious faith in God, with God rightly understood as having a great say on one's personal morality, whether one steals or not, whether one commits adultery or goes inebriate at the bottle. There is a lot to say about in Christianity about personal life, one's way with one's wife. Is one sweet to her, or is one always demanding and perfectionistic with one's wife? These are all things that are part of the Christian argument for a godly life. But also, as this black minister suggests, it touches on the form of government. It touches on whether men are enslaved or free. And there is a lot of slavery. There is a lot in local economy that we need to understand is a picture of the servitude. The servitude is to the promise of credit, the inexplicable, the imponderable helix of credit, if you will. A mystery beyond mysteries, and yet we are all on the treadmill. I may be a little bit less on the treadmill than others. Do you know that I've never once checked out my FICO score? I don't know what it is. I don't care what it is. I've not had a credit card in my name since I was a college student in Charlottesville when I was studying English at the University of Virginia. I did get one from Sears back then. May have been under the MasterCard brand. I don't remember. But I've never taken an interest in that, and one reason is I don't want to feed the tapeworm. The tapeworm is the credit economy, the massive economy that requires the gigantic scale of an operation such as Express Scripts in the pharmacy field, in the field of medications and drugs, and in other fields as well. And what we have to understand is that this gigantic system is all around us in many parts. It's in many parts. And Maria Shriver, as a Democrat, has recently finished a documentary about a woman here in Chattanooga, and I wanted to mention this to you. This is brought to my attention by Chloe Morrison, the writer at Nougat.com. She has a real nice story about Maria Shriver's story, and she got a separate interview with a woman named Katrina Gilbert. And this story makes all kinds of points that one might not have imagined initially arise from it. One is on why marriage matters, because Katrina Gilbert is one of 42 million women in the country, Chloe says, living in poverty or balancing on the brink of indigence. Well, why is poverty so endemic among women who are single? Well, it's because they have children. And they have children because they're not married. And they're not married because someone didn't take his vow seriously. That is to say, she or her husband. And a husband can nowadays, thanks to no-fault divorce, which was a revision of the definition of marriage, a husband can nowadays dump his wife if she's not attractive. He doesn't have to prove infidelity. He doesn't have to prove abuse. He doesn't have to prove fraud, lack of sexual relations, or anything like that. He doesn't have to prove anything. He can just say, you don't suit me anymore, and I write you a bill of divorcement. So this great trend in the 1970s and 80s, no-fault divorce, effectively redefined marriage, just like the gays are wanting to do, just like the homosexual lobby is trying to do. So that's one point that comes out of this this story that Nougat.com is publishing today. There's a teaser. There's a couple-minute synopsis of the show about Katrina Gilbert. The headline of the name of the movie is called "Paycheck to Paycheck: Life and Times of Katrina Gilbert," She is a certified nursing assistant. She works sometimes 8 days straight and on holidays for $9.49 an hour. Of course, that's paper money. She's not being paid 9 real dollars, which if she were, she would be, let me figure out how if you want to buy a real dollar, you have to pay 16 paper bucks for it. There's a 16-to-1 ratio. The paper money has declined so badly, all to the injury of the common man and the common woman. And the story, she says, a roof over our heads with heat. That's all I can do, she said in the documentary. Filmmakers Sherry Cookson and Nick Doob filmed the HBO documentary, which airs March 17. There are about 300 children currently enrolled at the Chambliss Center, where Katrina gets help with her children, and about 200 who are on a waiting list. So Chambliss Center is helping women in this very distressing financial situation. Apparently, part of the show has Katrina Gilbert living in a small trailer home. She says, "I didn't expect to be a single mom of 3 children. That was my biggest fear, but I am, and I'm trying to deal with it in the best way I can." So what this woman needs is a man like you. She needs to have social capital. Our show is about capital. Our show is about wealth. The greatest form of capital, of course, is one that you cannot buy. It's one you cannot obtain by your own devices, your own intelligence, and that would be God. God is the greatest form of capital, but He only gives Himself to some people, right? He's not available to everybody. He doesn't condescend to save everybody, but just certain people. So if you have God, I know you don't. You don't claim to be a Christian, you, my listener, but a man who does have God has the greatest source of capital that he could possibly have in his life. But there are many other kinds of capital that are derivative, and they reflect that vertical relationship that a sinner has with his Creator. And that verticality, I would like to suggest, be replicated in your situation with a neighbor, such as Katrina Gilbert. She needs to have vertical capital, social capital. That is to say, someone of your means looking out for her, making sure that she doesn't run 20,000 miles on the same pan of oil, right? That kind of thing. You hear when she leaves in the morning, since she leaves before you, that her engine is really bad, and she's got a lousy universal joint that's about to give out, and you know it. Why don't you go and talk to her? Maybe your son can help her out. Maybe you could say, "Look, sweetheart, just take the car over to S&S Auto Repair in Brainerd, and I'll pay for it. Okay, just go ahead." That's social capital that women who are shorn of marriage, who are not part of the marriage bed, the marriage life, the marriage security, that's the kind of social capital that they need. And this story by a liberal Democrat, Maria Shriver, who's the producer, is going to make that point. It's going to make the point, of course, she's going to make the point that we need to have more government welfare, but you can just let that go by, right? Just ignore that. Realize that the real point is that there are hundreds and hundreds of women in Chattanooga with children who need social capital, and they need it from someone from whom they do not deserve it. They need it from someone from whom they cannot claim it as a right, and that would be you, the man of mercy, the neighbor, the man who knows that the redefinition of marriage to exclude from divorce a legal cause, has thrown tens of millions of women with children onto the mercy of the welfare state. And you know how merciful the welfare state is, right? How rational, how reasonable, how gracious, and how personal. You know that, right? Well, this is one story, the Maria Shriver story. It's at nougat.com. Go to nougat.com to read it. Chloe Morrison did the story. But just one more point about Katrina Gilbert, the nurse in Chattanooga. Her situation is another reason that Jerry Mitchell is wrong. Jerry Mitchell is the city councilman in Chattanooga. And Jerry Mitchell says that 2 men having anal sex together are equal to you, my listener, making sweet love to your wife there in your bedroom upstairs after the children are in bed. And you're enjoying the liberty of marriage, the freedom of marriage, the delight of marriage. Jerry Mitchell says that these 2 things are legally equal because he was a swing vote in a conspiracy against capital perpetrated by the city council. And that is in the form of an ordinance in which the city government alleges it has the authority to create a legal form called domestic partnership. It has not that authority at all, and we need to sue to stop that as a breach of etiquette, an action ultra vires, an action outside of the authority of a mere municipal corporation who derives all of its power from the General Assembly. And do we not know that the General Assembly has done something in favor of marriage? Has there not been a constitutional amendment ratified by the people, imposed by the people of our state, that marriage is to be only between one man and one woman? So Jerry Mitchell, he is connected to this picture of Katrina Gilbert. He is against marriage. Well, Katrina Gilbert probably is against the marriage she was entered into. Her husband was a ne'er-do-well who had a drug habit and destroyed, the story says, destroyed her marital union and left her abandoned. But we need to understand that Jerry Mitchell cannot redefine marriage, as he has pretended to do with the city councilman Chris Anderson at his side in the next seat. And we need to understand that no-fault divorce was a redefinition of marriage that has brought about the damage, the cultural, social, and economic damage to millions of women, such as Katrina Gilbert. There's another story that is in the same direction, and it's in the Wall Street Journal today. The story is about about the desperation of the American common man. Because this story is true in today's Wall Street Journal, WSJ.com, you need to realize that the pressure is greater than ever, and perhaps the discontinuous moment, the divine interruption of the status quo, that is really not a miracle at all. It'll be a completely rational, though unexpected, event. The problem is that student loans entice borrowers more for cash than a degree, and the story shows the precipitous rise of college debt, passing $1.08 trillion, according to a graphic from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And what's happening is because these loans allow for the outlays for living expenses beyond tuition and books, many people are signing up to go to the dead-end university, the dead-end college. The story says, it has a picture of a man who's working, a younger fellow, I guess maybe in his 30s, Ray Salent of Fort Lauderdale. He is taking courses for a degree in theater. It says student loans allow him to cover any needs that arise. That's a photograph in the Wall Street Journal. He's 30 years old, a retail clerk, and was unemployed in 2012 when he enrolled part-time at Broward County's community college. And that allowed him to borrow thousands of dollars to pay his rent, to pay rent to his mother, cover his cell phone bill, and catch the occasional movie. The only way I feel I can survive financially, he says, is by going back to school and putting myself into more student debt. He's added $8,000 in student debt from his living expenses. Returning to school also gave him a reprieve on the $400 a month he owed from previous student debt, because the federal government doesn't require payments while borrowers are in school. So in other words, you have student debt, and to avoid paying it, to avoid paying uncle the debt, you go back to school, incurring more debt to avoid paying the first one. Is there something wrong with this picture? And the category in the allowance is living expenses. It's a vague category. The story says a figure determined by each individual school. It can also be easier than getting a bank loan because the government performs no credit check. And you have to know one thing: the government, if you have a debt through the student loan apparatus to the good people, you will not be able to cast it off. You cannot bankrupt it. This is a perpetual servitude. It is a perpetual slavery that grown men will be paying off when they are drawing in Social Security. They will be paying off their student debts from when they were in their 20s and 30s, assuming, of course, that the national government lasts that long. There's a quote in the story, one more point. Half the expenses, according to an Department of Education Inspector General, half the expenses from loans that are flowing out into students from eight universities are going to pay miscellaneous items. So half the college debt that's been accrued of late, according to this story, or it is suggested in the story, goes to pay for rent and cable and minor car repair and fuel fill-ups and grocery expenses from Enzo's. So some students say they intend to get a degree but must borrow as much as possible because they can't find decent paying jobs to cover day-to-day expenses. One more man I'll mention, Tommy Matherney in the Wall Street Journal stories, 32-year-old. He's the father of 5 children in Billings, Montana. He's been going to school since 2010. When he realized the $10 an hour he was making as a mall security guard wasn't covering his family's expenses. He uses roughly $2,000 in student loans each year to stock his fridge and catch up on his bills. His wife is a stay-at-home mother who also gets loans to take online courses. Do you see a problem here? This is local economy that's on an external lifeline. This is local economy in Billings, Montana, and certainly here in Chattanooga are people just like this. And the lifeline is not family capital. The lifeline is government debt that cannot be erased in bankruptcy. Mr. Matherney, the father of 5, has $51,600 in federal loans. This is, I'm not going to say this is a problem because that's just stating the obvious, but what we have here is we have a picture of a system which is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. So that raises the question it raises a question that I want to look at now, and that is, how can the state survive? And if we're talking about the survival of the state, we have to make a distinction. Here we are now in the ethereal, right? We are way above local economy. We're not talking about Belvoir Pharmacy being sold or anything like that. This is not local business news, right? This is not your latest executive being hired at SunTrust or another restaurant opening on Ottawa Georgetown Road. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking here about a national sector, and there's a distinction that has to be made between the faces of that sector, though they are not faces at all of humans. They are simply institutions, and what the Turkish press some not too long ago began calling the deep state in that country. Now we have a deep state here in our country, and people such as Gary North have written about it, and there are other writers that explore the deep state, which is Darwinian. Okay, it is Darwinian in the sense that it seeks its own survival. It is beyond the corporation of the United States, I would like to suggest. It is a group of people whose actions are all public, but their actions are not understood really, and they're not highlighted when they take place. But they are public. It's not a conspiracy in the sense that there are secret handshakes and the people meet in Masonic lodges where there are no windows and only one door with a small square window, very dark, with some metal screen behind it in it. The deep state is something that is rising, as we've discussed here at Nuganomics.com, rising from the French Revolution in the 1780s, but had its precursor before that. But the state is something apart from government. The state is apart from a kingdom, right? So we have to understand that there's a national government in Washington. There's the Congress. There's the executive branch. There's the judicial branch, and then surrounding these are all kinds of actors, which are sectors. There's the military-industrial sector. There's the prison sector, which of course, and then there's the banking sector, the retail corporate sector. And then you have the tax sector, the tax avoidance sector, the banking field, and those are, and the Federal Reserve System, and these are all important actors. And what news coverage covers is these circles. Okay, these circles with all these little names in them, such as the Federal Reserve System, or executive agencies, regulators. Okay. But behind that is this deep sector, which is really hard. It's hard to pin down, and I'd say it's largely speculative in a discussion of it. You can't know for sure what is going on even. And so the question is, in a writer that I think is very influential, and I'd like to recommend him to you. His name is Charles Hugh Smith. And what are the motives of the deep state, and who is going to get thrown under the bus in the next financial crisis? That's his post for today at his website of twominds.com. And I want to talk a little bit about what he says and quote from his essay. He's a very important writer. He's libertarian oriented and is extremely well informed. And in a nutshell, he says because the deep state has a Darwinian method of operation, it is purely rational. It is concerned only with its own survival. The question is, who is going to be thrown under the bus as it directs things to be made aright for its own survival? And that question is, how will the meltdown take place? The meltdown is going to have to happen. There's going to be a meltdown that it is necessary to preserve its structure. It's the structure behind the structure. And he explores in his post today what he calls vectors of dependency. And as he measures these vectors of dependency, he's going to suggest that Wall Street is going to be the fall guy. Wall Street is the fall guy. Now, the question is, are you in Wall Street or on Wall Street? If you are, I'd like to suggest local economy. Local economy means liquidating out of Wall Street, out of national economy, bringing the money home, going liquid, paying off your debt. And the point I like to make is invest locally. That's what I'm doing. I'm a local investor. David Toulis is my name. Our station is Copperhead 1240, and the show is Nooganomics.com. That's Nooganomics.com.
Here comes Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's got third. He's going for second. Earnhardt going for the lead. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series is on the Motor Racing Network. Coverage continues Sunday here at Live on the Motor Racing Network, the voice of NASCAR. And for ticket information, go to mrn.com.
Check it out this Sunday live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station, Copperhead 1240. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on the 2014 Camry. This is unheard of. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a new 2014 Camry. But you have to get to Capital Toyota on Lee Highway. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on the 2014 Camry. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway, where the savings are that much better.
When your loved one dies, we in the South say he's passed, gone to another place. She left us here. Death is so much more than a trying time, but we have to deal with it. You want a funeral home that helps you get through your ordeal. You want a professional, but not one who lacks warmth or sincerity. I'm Josh Jacobs. That's what I offer at Hamilton Funeral Home and Cremation Services in Hickson. Care for you. A local owner and operator who keeps your funeral costs down. A great place in which to remember, even celebrate, the life of the one who's gone. Just call me, 531-3975. This is Josh. Again, the number is 531-3975. Hamilton Funeral Home. Oh, one more thing. Love your neighbor. Buy local.
Picture that curl of steam rising from your fresh-made pizza. And in a flash, let it take you aloft, teasing all your senses. I'm talking about Jet's Pizza. If you eat out of Jet's at Hickson, or take home your steaming deep dish square pizza, you'll love Jet's. They use only the best ingredients in a family recipe. Also try the cheesy bread, wings, chicken, or bread with bacon, antipasta or Greek salad. Jet's Pizza and buy low near the S-curves. Open till 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. You can order online or have it delivered. JetsPizza.com. That's JetsPizza.com. Or call them now. They'll have it ready when you get there. 757-1616. That's 757-1616. Hot and delightful above the clouds. Jet's Pizza. Now that's Italian.
With recent changes out of Washington.
Yeah, we've got $700 or $400 coming from Bruce Krebs. I'm hoping he's going to renew. He pays 2 months at a time,
Someone to trust all your
$200 a month,
332
but he's not available today, and we need to collect him.
Visit us at 10327 Dayton Pike in Sunny Days across from the
So he's the entrepreneur source.
Brainerd Road. We guarantee our work. Call 332-3339. Online at ejpelton.com. Look at that.
All systems go.
Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. Your advantage is in our name. Customer service. Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. Family owned and operated. Advantage Printing and Mailing Services features the highest quality in all your printing and graphic needs, including engineering drawings, offset printing and mailing services. Advantage Printing and Mailing Services, your one-stop shop for color graphics and much, much more. Call 629-1800, 423-629-1800 for Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. 4031 Brainerd Road in Chattanooga. That's 4031 Brainerd Road in Chattanooga. Call 629-1800, 423-629-1800 for Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. Your advantage is in our name. Customer service.
All systems go.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, indoor professionals, better known as duct busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable duct busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, indoor professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
Get the latest news and information now. On your Twitter account, search Hot News Radio. That's Hot News Radio. For the latest news and information, go to Hot News Radio. That's twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News Radio.
Hi, David Toulis. Our show is Nuganomics.com. We cover local economy and the free markets, or the free market, singular, the idea of the marketplace, every day here from 1 to 3. And we are locally owned and locally operated, a show not controlled by the big media, where the daily template has to be followed, and the subjects have to be covered in the right way. And the need to avoid politically incorrect statements or vocabulary is paramount. No, we are not one of those. We have fresh local content, and we believe in local fare. We believe in slow food, and so if there's any nutritional value in our program, we hope you will shop local and not go to the center aisles of the store, where all those brightly colored plastic bags are from China. We believe in local economy, as does Josh Jennings. He runs Hamilton Funeral Home here in the north part of the county. Locally owned, locally operated. A great little place for you to have your wake, for him to handle your funeral arrangements. It's Hamilton Funeral Home, and the number is 531-3975. Call Josh Jennings and ask if he can help you with your time of grief and distress. And you have to talk about the executorship of the will, and what did Mom have in trust, and are all the POAs, the powers of attorney, in order, and so on. If you are hungry, make sure that you shop local in the pizza world. Jet's Pizza, which is near the Bi-Lo near the S-curves on Hickson Pike, has a great little offering called the Deep Dish Square Pizza. And order one tonight, perhaps after work. Call 757-1616. That's 757-1616, or go to jetspizza.com. and order a great little bit of healthy, freshly prepared food. We are the show about capital, and if you want to save on a new car and have the best line of car that you can, one that will last you 300,000 miles or more, think about going to Capital Toyota. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway has of course a full service department, and it's offering this to you, my listener, here at Nuganomics.com. Try out a test out a car, and you'll get a free $25 Target gift certificate for your wife. Okay, something that you can buy for her. Right, she needs to have a little encouragement, your sweetheart. To get that gift certificate after trying out a new car at Capital Toyota, the number is 888-404-9970. That's 888-404-9970. Also the same number if you want to talk to somebody about detailing your car for $199 or parts or service, anything like that. And if you have any service done, by the way, at Capital, your local economy capital player, you get a free car wash. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you're a man like me who doesn't wash his car very often, or really never, that might be just what you need to do. Have a repair done at Capital and have a car washed thoroughly from the outside. And so we're talking about the idea of the deep state, and there's been a suggestion by a writer I respect that the deep state, which is to say the people behind the people, right? The good people behind the good people, the 1% behind the 1%, if you will, have the idea that to maintain their control in their Darwinian me-first perspective, where their authority, their provision is the only thing that matters. They view the people of the country with disdain. They are utilitarians, and the greatest benefit to their number, that's what they look out for. And this is an analysis that perhaps the occupied Chattanooga people share with me, David Toulis, your host here at Nuganomics.com, the libertarian with the Christian distinctives. Well, Charles Hugh Smith suggests at his website of twominds.com that the deep state, to survive, is going to have to throw Wall Street under the bus, because he says we're at peak Wall Street, and that Wall Street has become a threat to them. Now, Wall Street is a threat to you, and this has been our analysis from the beginning of our work here at Copperhead 1240 and at Nuganomics.com. Wall Street is your enemy, and Wall Street is not where you're going to prosper. You're going to prosper in a more personal and personalistic economic framework, which would be, I'd like to suggest, local economy, investing in yourself, investing in a local small business, that kind of thing. But the problem that we have is that there are too many paper claims on wealth. In other words, the claims upon wealth, the claims to value, exceed many dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, the actual wealth that's there. So something has got to give. Somebody has got to be zeroed out, according to Smith's essay today. He says that we can arrive at some idea of who's going to have to be zeroed out by looking at what he calls vectors of dependency. That's a phrase I think that he's originated. And he says the deep state depends on the survival of the U.S. nation state, but the nation state does not depend on the deep state for its survival, despite the certainty within the deep state that we are the only thing keeping this thing together. So you have government solutions to problems, and that is to say the solutions that big government always gives. That would be responses to crises by elected officials and the Fed or regulators. And they always respond to a crisis in one of two ways. They choose a short-term politically expedient to fix the problem, right? Reducing political pain, and that's also known as kicking the can down the road. That's kind of a cliche now, of course. And it also sacrifices politically weak people's interests and politically weak parties' interests to protect its own cronies and its own fiefdoms. It has a kind of a triage. Somebody has to pay. He says in the 2008 financial crisis The Fed threw savers and the bottom 95% under the bus to funnel hundreds of billions of dollars, what was previously paid in interest, to the banks to rebuild their broken balance sheets. The Fed also provided limitless liquidity to bank trading desks and financiers to skim billions from carry trades, effectively channeling the nation's financial resources to enrich its cronies, the top 1/10 of 1%. The deep state must take a longer view, he says, and here's where his analysis gets really interesting, and make strategic triage decisions. All sorts of people, groups, and policies are routinely tossed under the bus. Foreign leaders, resistance groups, civil liberties, etc., as the deep state adjusts to long-term developments and crises with strategic consequence. Many deep state decisions and policies, he says, are barely noticed, even though they are completely public. And then he mentions as an example of that the dissolution of the Soviet Union and how the deep state got billions of dollars to be spent by the federal government to pay for non-proliferation controls by the U.S. Upon the Russian, the former Soviet military arsenal. He says, I'm beginning to discern the possibility of a strategic deep state response to the next and inevitable financial crisis. This crisis is simple to summarize. The paper claims on wealth so far exceed actual wealth that something's got to give. These claims include trillions of dollars in shadow banking bets, derivatives, and other leveraged claims, all teetering on a tiny base of real collateral, and trillions of dollars in debt-based claims on future income. Think of that man in the Wall Street Journal story. He has 5 children, or he had 5 children, and he has $58,000 in federal debt that he cannot ever escape in bankruptcy. Simply put, the vast majority of these claims will have to be zeroed out. These phantom claim assets will be voided and declared worthless. This leads me to the key question. Who, or it should be whom will the deep state throw under the bus to preserve itself and the nation state? And he says that, he proposes that it will be Wall Street. And that it's better to throw Wall Street under the bus than the population of the country. Why? Because the people, the American people, are becoming increasingly angry. They're frustrated by the inability to get ahead. They're angry at taxes. They're angry at the total state surveillance. They're very angry, and there's an explosive mood in some quarters. Now, maybe you don't get much of that. Well, let me know. I'll tell you what. Let me know if you have a story about how angry people are. Let me hear about that. Send me an email. Go to Nuganomics.com, my website, and send me an email through the contact window. I'd love to hear from you. And my name is David Toulis. Thanks for joining me here today. Our show is Nuganomics.com. So he says, in other words, the phantom financier claims of Wall Street now pose a strategic threat to the integrity of the U.S. and its deep state. The deep state needs a functioning U.S. nation state, and a mass uprising arising from the collapse of the state cannot be suppressed with new whiffs of grape shot. The collapse of global preeminence and state financing of food stamps and other social welfare programs directly threaten the deep state. So it's going to exploit the public mood against Wall Street, according to this projection of twominds.com. It's certainly not lost on the deep state that a palpable hatred of bankers, financiers, and the Federal Reserve is taking root across the land. And we have Ron Paul in many ways to thank for this growing recognition of the perniciousness of fractional reserve banking and the abstractification of the dollar. He says, I know this is outside the mainstream, but I think it is increasingly likely that the financial system's skimmers and swindlers are being recognized as potential strategic threats to the deep state, and ones that it can eliminate. Think of eliminating 10,000 swindlers, bankers, and fractional reserve operators in the financial sector, but not to the applause of 200, 300 million adult Americans. Of course, they're not all adult Americans, but let's say 150 million adult Americans who understand that we are a country that is given to all work and no pay. Which, by the way, that last phrase, all work and no pay, is the title of one of my favorite books by Dr. Paul Heim. Wall Street is not the deep state, and I think that's the point he's making. I think it's very helpful because, in a way, in my understanding of local economy vis-a-vis the national economy, I have kind of posited Wall Street and government, kind of a combination, as the actors that matter, and that we are reacting against them. We need to act in a forward-thinking way as against their control of the economy. And perhaps I've been a little bit superficial. It seems that he is suggesting in his piece today, Charles Hugh Smith. He says it's widely assumed that Wall Street rules the roost in both the mainstream financial media and in the alternative financial blogosphere. In my view, the speculative excesses and political power of Wall Street pose a strategic threat to the deep state, and as a result, a showdown between the deep state and the surface machinery of governance. Now, I like that idea, okay? These agencies, including the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they are surface machinery, okay, surface machinery of government that has been captured by Wall Street is looming. Though everyone who is convinced the U.S. dollar will go to zero is confident that Wall Street will emerge victorious from the next financial crisis, I am convinced, he says, of the opposite. And in a previous essay, Smith suggests that we don't face a hyperinflation, but in fact a deflation. That deflation may be a real boon to the deep state. Though it would seem that hyperinflation is unavoidable when you look at the economic sector in terms of the surface machinery of the Fed and the banking sector. He says the deep state will do whatever it takes to eliminate strategic threats to the integrity of itself and the nation it depends on for its power and survival. In a financial crisis that threatens the dollar and the deep state, the phantom claims of Wall Street's financier skimmers, scammers, and swindlers will be tossed under the bus with few qualms. The triage might even be performed with a certain relish. And then he puts it another way: we've reached peak Wall Street, and it's all downhill from here. Now, this is helpful because what it does is not make you anxious. I'm not saying these things to make you think that we need to start biting our nails. That we need to be concerned or worried about the national economy. The national economy is a disaster, and because I think it is so, and I say that as if I were offering a foregone conclusion, right? But I'm still thinking about this, and I'm offering provisional suggestions to you, my listener, here at the Copperhead Station, and that is that we need to invest locally. We need to liquefy local economy, and part of that is when you say, okay, I'm giving up in national economy. I'm selling out of Wall Street. And that's what I think you should do in general terms, okay? I'm not giving you investment advice here. I'm not qualified for that. But I'm trying to look at things from a macroeconomic perspective that has a free market and equitable root, which is to say a root in Christianity, right? Equity is Christianity laid out in the marketplace. Equity, fairness, justice, that's what Christianity requires of all men. And it is the basis, of course, of prosperity. Capital comes out of Christianity. Just read the histories. Read Weber's 1920s book on the Protestant work ethic and the rise of capitalism, and other books as well. Vishal Mangalwadi is another one. And there are numerous writers that explore this question of capitalism, and the source of it in the revelation of God to a fallen, despairing race of men whose first parents were Adam and Eve. That couple mentioned on the front page of not the Wall Street Journal, but the Chattanooga Times Free Press in the Sunday paper. So the idea that I'm trying to get to here in a kind of a nutshell form is that we have to have local economy. We have to have a more vibrant local economy. The Times Free Press just now has, in the past hour or so, has posted a story about Ron Haar, the man at the Chamber of Commerce retiring from his post as the CEO. The Chamber of Commerce has a national economy perspective. It has 1,800 members or so, 1,500 members, but I think it could have many more if it really cared about local business and small business. If it took a local-centric and zealous free market perspective. And you have to understand that the free market perspective is really anti-political. Why is the Chamber of Commerce political? Why does it always think in terms of big business? Well, because it assumes that government has a role in the economy. Now, in one sense, that's a reasonable supposition to make, because any more state governments, county governments, and city governments are business entities. They don't have just government functions. They have vast business interests. Think, for example, of one wonderfully fruity point in this notion of government as business, and that is the consolidated retirement system of Tennessee teachers, ostensibly paying out teachers in retirement. Do you realize that there are about $1 billion of obligations a year at the most, according to the most recent comprehensive annual financial report for that corporation? But the asset base is $36 billion. I think that's as big as the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee, whose CAFR I haven't really looked at it, I think it's worth about $36 billion too. I'm not sure about that. It seems to me that it should be much more. But here you have a corporation which is a gigantic profit machine, a government profit machine that buys and sells stock, buys and sells shares, owns strip malls, owns lenders, owns banks, and government. So government has financial interests. It doesn't run with a zero budget, meaning that at the end of the year the budget is zero. There's nothing left. It should run that way, but it doesn't. It is a profit-seeking competitor to many other corporate and private and personal lines of business, and so Ron Haar, his perspective is that one. Okay, government as business, government business. That's the perspective that seems to be exhibited with all the effort that group, that trade group, gave to bringing Volkswagen here into town, and many other things, which again are not really profitable long term for Chattanooga. And why do I say that? Why would you think that why am I not as glad as you are that another out-of-state company has set up shop at Enterprise South? Why am I not clapping as loudly as you are? Well, I'm clapping, just not enough to make my hands really warm, because that company is siphoning profit and sending profit away from Chattanooga. If you are a local economy person, if you're a lover of local economy, you've got to have the owner here. The owner needs to be a Chattanoogan or a Hamilton County resident. Why? Because you want the profit to stay here. If every business in Chattanooga or Hamilton County were owned by an out-of-town business, our county and our city would dry up, the highways would be overgrown with weeds, the plants would be shut down, the retail malls, the retail shops would be empty. No one would be here anymore, except for a few homeless people, like those that were left behind in Jerusalem during the Babylonian exile. When Nehemiah came back, that's what he found, just a few poor people who not worth much to the conquerors. Well, that's what would happen to Chattanooga if you didn't have profit. You have to have local ownership and local profit. Otherwise, you cannot have a city. City cannot prosper if all the profit goes out, right? Because as the left likes to say, as your environmentalist friend likes to tut-tut and cluck at you, we need to have a sustainable economy. Well, I agree with that. I agree with the left. Yes, I agree with the environmentalists, and so do you. We need to have a sustainable economy, and that means you have to have profit. You have to have local ownership. The deep state is going to throw Wall Street under the bus, so you need to not be a part of it, all right? You need to be as much in your investment capital, your savings, you need to be as much out of national economy as you can. I'm not giving investment advice here. I'm giving a general idea. Get out of national economy. Invest locally. Find local people you want to invest in. Well, for example, would you like to invest in me? Would you like to do that? Well, I need capital. My name is David Toulis, and I'm a businessman. I need capital. Would you like to invest in me? So think about other people like that who say, hey, I've got a local business, and I'd like to add some staff to provide a new line of service or to develop a new production line. Would you be willing to invest $500,000 with me? Well, with your own prudence, you find out that's a good arrangement. The man involved has had long roots in Chattanooga. His family is here. His mother and father are here. His aunts and uncles live in Rossville. He's got other relations up in Dayton. Yes, I think I want to invest in that man. So what you've done is you've taken money out of the national economy. You've shifted your vote. You're voting no on national, and you're voting yes to Chattanooga. I need $500,000 too for a new idea. But many others do too. You need to bring that capital home. You, my listener, the investor, and you need to invest in the local economy. And as the national disaster happens and Wall Street gets thrown under the bus, if Smith is right, if he's right, and the deep state is going to sacrifice Wall Street to save itself, then you need to be better situated than you are now. And my name is David Toulis. That is my theory. It's just a theory. It is a suggestion. Think about it. Just think about where this could go. Our show is Nooganomics.com. Go to my website, Nooganomics.com. Please send me an email. You, my listener, it's time you sent me an email, isn't it? Go to Nooganomics.com and just touch the contact window and write me a few words.
Check this out. I just routed by phone through the Tor network, and now I'm on the deep web on my phone.
Motor Racing Network, the voice of NASCAR.
I need
And
URL
for continued information, go to
URLs.
Check it out this Sunday live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Copperhead 1240.
Not my calls, but my
0%
internet.
financing and a
So any internet
$1,000 rebate
shows
on a
up like
2014
that.
Camry. This is unheard of. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a new 2014
Yeah.
Camry.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get the capital to the off-road highway.
Mobile,
Get
download that,
0%
and you download the
financing and a
application.
$1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway with a savings of that much better.
There you go.
Are you
Completely
tired of
anonymous.
working in corporate America, or have you recently lost your job and would like to consider owning your own business? If you are, please call me, as I can help you look
What do you think
at
of my
franchises,
discussion?
business
Were you listening to any of it?
opportunities that fit
I
you,
thought it's the
economy
deep
you're
state
in, and
throwing the Wall Street under the bus.
Greater Chattanooga area.
That tends to be the case, doesn't it?
Well,
Opportunity. I also
Smith
help you
is
find
very
the best way to
interesting.
finance the business,
He's very
including paying yourself through the startup phase. If you would like to learn more about opportunities that may be right
Well,
for
you
you,
know, I'm
please
completely
call me
against
for a
any
free
sort of
assessment. My name is
government
Bruce
meddling
Credit
in
of the Entrepreneur Source.
the
Our
market,
number is
so it's-
423-875-5621.
Well, I'm
When
glad
the
you
woman
are.
dies, we in the South say
glad
he's
you are, too. It's
passed,
good to
gone
have
to another place.
smart people
She left
talking
us
on the
here.
radio.
Death is so much more than a trying time, so we have to deal with it. You want
Well, you know,
that helps you get through your
I'm not
ordeal.
being
You
dogmatic.
want
I'm just
professional.
being
I'm not
suggestive.
one
I'm
who
just
lacks
saying,
more
let's
or
think that
sincere.
maybe
I'm
this-
Josh
maybe you'll
Jennings.
see-
That's what I offer.
Well, it would
Instant
completely
funeral
defeat
home
our
cremation
purpose if we're being
services
forceful
that
about it.
care
We're all about
for you.
freedom.
A local owner and operator who keeps your
I'm not saying I'm right, you gotta believe me. I'm saying,
Great
just
place
think
in
about
which
it.
to
Maybe,
remember.
maybe there's
Even
something
so,
here. Maybe this is just a suggestion.
Sure.
This is just kind of a sketch.
531-3975. This is Josh. Again, the number is
I'd like to get some email from my listener.
3975. Hamilton
I'll get that.
Funeral. Oh,
Yeah, you gotta know your email a
love
lot.
your neighbor.
Huh?
You gotta push out your email a lot.
Well, is saying Nooganomics.com, go into contact portal, is that enough, or do I
No.
need to?
Steve,
No, put out your direct email.
pizza. And in a flash,
Like,
they'll
tell
take
them
you
what your
off,
email address is.
teasing all your senses. I'm talking about
Well,
Jets
if I send
Pizza.
it to David
If you
Toulis
love
editor,
Jets and
that's
Dixon,
my main
or
account.
take
I'll
home
get a
your
lot of
steam,
spam.
deep dish square pizza you'll
You know,
love.
I haven't
Jets.
gotten any
They
spam
use
calls
only the
from
best
my
ingredients in a
account.
family recipe. Also
Other than
try
just
the
the usual
cheesy
stuff on
bread,
Twitter
beans,
saying, hey, won't you
chicken,
do people?
or peppered bacon, antipasta or Greek salad.
Yeah, I
Jets
would go
Pizza
ahead and put
and
out
buy
the
low near the
regular
S-curves. Open
email
till 10
address.
p.m. Sunday through Thursday and
Whatever
11
you-
p.m. Friday and Saturday. You
Oh, yeah.
can order online or have
Also,
delivered.
I would suggest that you get an
JetsPizza.com.
email
That's
address at
jetspizza.com. or call them now. We'll have it
So
ready
you
when
have
you
like
get there.
David at
757-1660. That's
I don't know, you have to contact the
757-1616. Hot and delightful above the clouds. Chet's Pizza. Now that's a
It shouldn't be
town.
that hard though.
Hello,
Everybody
guess
has
what?
that.
Haven't you
I
heard
mean,
about the
Sam
World Flight
has
Museum in
radio
Hickson?
at
The Hickson Flight
1240.com is
Museum
his
is one of the
email
most
address.
unique places you'll ever visit.
sure
We
you can
believe in
tell
not
you
only
that.
preserving history, but giving it life. Our exhibits
think we
are
should all have those
breathing
addresses,
historical
though. That would
artifacts that
help a
are
lot.
regularly maintained
We
and
all had
operated.
that
Hickson Flight
1240
Museum,
addresses.
offering guided tours, birthday parties, field trips, plane rides, event rentals, and air shows.
The name of the new lesbian Girl Scout Girl Experience Officer is Krista Cock-John Poland.
2359. The Hickson
Surely
Flight
that's a fake
Museum.
name.
Its curators encourage visitors
it's
to climb into the
Breitbart.com.
pilot seat of the North
Okay.
American T-28 Trojan,
You're usually
peer into
right.
the cockpit of a
Did you hear me
1946
puzzling over
and enjoy a scenic
LGBTQ?
trip over
Yeah, what is that?
Chattanooga in a
Look that up.
1958
I looked it up,
public
is
it queer?
for individual
Yeah, it
or
stands for
group tours,
queer.
and we welcome school groups,
I
Boys and
think
Girl
what-
Scout troops, or any
All the
group
things.
interested in learning about aviation history. And what we
I
do,
thought they were all
please
queer,
visit
but
our
apparently
website,
not.
HicksonFlightMuseum.org, 423-228-2359. Check us out on Facebook. Southern Rock, kicking country, Tennessee talk.
Good thinking, bad.
Get the latest news and information now. On your Twitter account, search Hot News Radio. That's Hot News Radio. For the latest news and information, go to Hot News Radio. That's twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News Radio is a service of Copperhead 1240.
David Toulis here. If you need some duct work done, if you need to get the mold or grot or gradu out of the duct work in your business or home, call Joan Thompson. Dick and Joan Thompson started Ducts, the indoor air professionals, formerly known as Duct Busters. The number is 876-9907, 876-9907. And remember, every Friday morning is Panera Posse, which meets at the Panera Bread store in Hickson, just uphill from the Northgate Mall, that center where the retail center that is going to be going half dark soon. And not far from Northgate is a great little car dealer I wanted to mention to you, River City Car Exchange. Used cars. Two college chums run this little dealership that has an interest in the guy buyer. Jeeps and pickup trucks and SUVs are there. And also, for your daughter, if she's looking for a first starter car, I'd like to suggest that you go to River City Car Exchange down there by the Waring Drug Stores near, what street is it? On 153. Also, just if you want to do a test drive on a Capital Toyota car, Toyota being the best line of car you can buy, the one that lasts 300,000 miles, just call to make an appointment. Call 888-404-9970. That's 888-404-9970. And you'll get a free complimentary Target gift card worth $25 for just driving one of those beautiful new Camrys. Okay, so just think about that. You need to get another car and get one that will last. And Capital is the place you should go. Locally owned, locally run car dealership. People who probably think a lot like you do. I'm willing to bet that the folks down there are very much in tune with you, my listener, and your ideas about the marketplace. Well, like I said, we have a lot to get to and not really enough time. But there's been a lot of coverage in the local press about the Einwechter family, which lost two small children as a vehicle driving past a small lake near a residence in Dunlap, rolled over into the water and then tipped, and two children lost their lives. And I want to say something about the people involved in these deaths. The Einwechter family, many of them are Christians. And I think it's important to understand that Christianity is not just something that's fruity and on the margin. Christianity is the center of reality. In other words, Christianity claims to own all of reality. It claims that God, whom it worships through Jesus Christ, the Savior, is in charge of all things, that he is sovereign over every detail of life, that nothing happens outside of his providence, out of his divine and eternal decree, or his divine plan for not just men and nations, but individuals as well. In other words, there's a purpose in all things. And that's why the Christian theory really is so winning. And because Christianity overturns men's ideas, almost every one of them, it doesn't have to rely on bombs or subway knife attacks to make progress. It doesn't have to rely on rows of tanks with their cannon raised coming across the border into your country. It doesn't rely on that. It doesn't rely on the explosion. It doesn't rely on the detonation at the bar where the tourists are and the occasional soldier lounges with a girlfriend there in the corner. That's not what Christianity does to make an advance. Now, it's funny that other systems of religious belief all rely on either man's good works or threats and violence. And I would say that progressivism is a kind of religion. Just by the way, progressivism we could also call statism, which is the worship of the state, where the state is God. The state can do no wrong. And you find people who are statists in the Republican Party, the Free Market Party ostensibly, the party of the family, and of course among the Democrats you find the same sort of idolatry. Christianity identifies the worship of the state, just like the worship of yourself as a form of idolatry. And the story in the Sunday paper about the Einwechters has at the end a quote from Monique, the mom who was driving the car that overturned. She was very tired. She had recently given birth. She had very small children in the vehicle. And she says, near the end of the story on the jump page, she says, "God is just. I cannot make up my idea of who God is. I cannot determine what is good. That is his job, not mine." What she's saying, what she's expressing, is what's called Christian resignation. And Christian resignation is really something that is important for people who don't have faith, and which is unattainable by them. And I'm thinking of this woman in the Maria Shriver documentary that's going to be airing a little bit later this month, called Paycheck to Paycheck: Life and Times of Katrina Gilbert, a woman, a single mother of three, abandoned by her drugged-out husband, and is struggling with a minimum wage job as a certified nursing assistant. There's no reference in this story by Chloe Morrison in Nougat.com of her Christian beliefs, but Monique Einwechter is quite different in what she is quoted as saying, and that is that God is providential and that God is good. So who is she to say that God has done an evil thing, right? Who is she, the clay, to say that the potter has done evil? Who is she as clay to demand of the potter, "How hast thou made me this way?" or "How hast thou brought my life to this pass?" And it's a beautiful story, and that, I want to just say that I think that the Christians are, in a way, they're called sheep, right? They're sheep because they follow the Lord Jesus Christ. They're often laughed at in the press. The establishment press, of course, makes them out to be horrendous. In the Arizona religious freedom protection bill that was vetoed by the governor, the press coverage made out to be that Christians and small business people want the right to discriminate against gays. Well, that's absolutely not the way. That's not true at all, and it misrepresents Christianity. Christianity does not rely on force. It does not, though one must admit that Christians should always exercise their lawful rights to act freely in the marketplace. And Christianity is all about liberty. It's all about thinking of the other. It's not about explosions and knife attacks in subway stations that leave 33 dead. Now, many Christian churches yesterday, being Sunday on the calendar, the first day of the week, also called the Christian Sabbath by the Reformed confessions of faith, and it is the day when many churches celebrate the Lord's Supper. And I just want to read you just a very brief petition to God, and I want to ask you a question. When you hear something like this, do you think that the people saying this, are they the ones who are likely to terrorize you, to put you in prison illegally, to oppress you, to harass you, to steal from you, to debase the value of your coinage, to prevent you from getting work, to treat you as an animal or a robot? Ask yourself if the people who say words like this, which is a prayer of repentance, ask yourself if they are not perhaps the best sort of people to steward the kingdom. Ask yourself, when Constantine in the 4th century brought an end to the persecution of Christians, he and his co-emperor Licinius issued the Edict of Milan. And the Edict of Milan ended a horrendous, bloody wave of persecutions. I think there were maybe 13 of them that the Roman emperors used to try the church. That was the great apocalypse, right? That was those were the great tribulation that the prophets heralded, that Christ heralded. And so ask yourself, when you read this little prayer is very common, I think, in Christianity, and it reflects the humility that Christian people have to God. And these are not people who can say this and confess their sins to God before sitting at his table to sup with him. These are not people that you need to be afraid of. In fact, I would suggest that they are the kind of people that should be elected to high office. They are the kind of people you would want to elect as sheriff, right? Sheriff Hammond, Jim Hammond, is a Christian man. And when he goes to church and takes the Lord's Supper, I'm confident he says things like this. And what you have to remember is that there is a humility in Christianity that is favorable to God, and of course, favorable to local economy. Because a man who can say he's sorry for his sins in this way is one you probably can trade with, okay? Is probably someone you can do business with. And this prayer says, Almighty God, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, maker of all things, judge of all men. Notice how Christians hold that they're under a judge. We acknowledge and mourn our manifold sins and wickedness, which we from time to time most grievously have committed by thought, word, and deed, against your divine majesty. Notice, when the Christian sins, he's hurting somebody else, of course, but he's also committing by thought, word, and deed an offense against your divine majesty, provoking most justly your wrath and indignation against us. So Christianity posits that God can be angry. He can be angry against men, man by man. That's you and me as men, right? But also against our people, right? Our nation, our tribe, our city, our state. This prayer of confession goes on. We do earnestly repent and are heartily sorry for these our misdoings. The remembrance of them is grievous unto us. The burden of them is intolerable. So notice there's this sense here that the Christian person, and think of Bill Knowles. He is a Christian man. He says these same things when he and his church, I think it's the First Church of the Nazarene, when the Lord's Supper is served there. There is also this sorrow for sin. The remembrance of our sin is grievous unto us. The burden of them is intolerable. Is that not a humble person to be able to say that? And he's not saying it just to another person, right? He's saying it to the one he esteems as his creator and his savior. And just a couple more lines here. Have mercy upon us, most merciful Father, for your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ's sake. Forgive us all that is past. And this prayer says, grant that we may hereafter serve and please you in newness of life, to the honor and glory of your name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. That is a prayer of confession in the Christian church. And I'm asking, do you not think that is that the people who can say things like that to God, are they not ones that you can esteem to serve you in your legislature, in your county clerk's office, in your sheriff's department, or in your city council? And we know there are city council members such as Chris Anderson who could not say something like that. That there is no submission to God in the life of Chris Anderson that would let him to be genuine in speaking a public prayer like that. And speaking of Chris Anderson, there's a story in the Times Free Press today at timesfreepress.com about George Goss, a Christian man, a minister, a part-time minister in Victory Baptist Church in North Georgia. He lives in East Lake, and he has obtained finally from the council member a list of his donors. And the story is by Joy Lakachik, and he has Anderson has friends across the country who want to support him. He got some donations from the Home Builders Association of Greater Chattanooga and the Tennessee Laborers PAC. There were no contributions, she points out, from organizations specifically identified with gay rights causes. Goss said he is making sure an issue of Anderson's support from outside the district because Anderson has said organizers of the recall attempt against him mostly aren't his constituents. And of course Anderson has bemoaned the fact that Charlie Wysong, who lives in another part of Chattanooga, is involved as a consultant to help these people unseat this candidate. The story says, let's see, he got $11,150 from PACs, $12,000 from donors who gave less than $100, and almost $15,000 from 40 donors who gave more than $100. Among the big donors was John Allen Brooks, the husband of his former campaign treasurer, and the third is Olin Mills here in Chattanooga, whose whose photography business went into bankruptcy after it was determined that it had underfunded the retirement scheme for staff. Now, we're mentioning this recall petition of the gay councilman for his indifference to his constituents and his pushing of an unconstitutional and illicit ordinance. There's a story on Breitbart.com about the Girl Scouts that I wanted to mention. If you have a daughter, beware of the Girl Scouts. Maybe you would be doing better to involve yourself in heritage girls. The story is about Krista Cockjohn Poehler, who's been hired as the Girl Scouts Chief Experience Officer. She is a lesbian, and it's said in the story at Breitbart.com that she's married to a woman named Ashley Cockjohn, and she is the new Girl Experience Officer for the Girl Scouts. Very influential position in New York. There's a New York Daily News account about the gay hairstylist in New Mexico who is dropping a client, and the client is the governor of that state, Susana Martinez. She's gotten the brush off from her hairstylist because she is opposed to the theory of homosexual marriages. This man told a local TV station, "The governor's aides called not too long ago wanting another appointment to come in. Because of her stances and her views on this, I told her aides no. They called the next day, asking if I'd changed my mind about taking the governor in, and I said no." So you have a poofter hairdresser refusing to cut the locks of the New Mexico governor because she is not in favor of this wonderful fantasy, the theory of gay unions. And speaking of scouts and oddball things touching on the gay theory, there's a story at the Blaze that I printed out this morning. The Walt Disney Company will cut funding to the Boy Scouts of America beginning in 2015. Why? Because of the Scouts' refusal to have homosexual leaders. This is just not tolerable. Disney does not provide direct funding to the Boy Scouts, but it donates money to some troops in exchange for volunteer hours completed by Disney employees, said Darren Smith, a Boy Scout spokesman, on Sunday. Well, that's very interesting, and I want to change topics here. And the question, there's another question that's kind of got to me, and I want to mention it just briefly today. My name is David Toulis. Thank you for joining me here at Nuganomics.com. We are here every weekday from 1 to 3 on our Copperhead station, Copperhead 1240. We have a plan to shift more toward talk, and I hope that you will keep your ears perked for changes in our format. We're going to have Coast to Coast with George Norrie every week. I think it's every weekday night from midnight to 6 or so. Very long program that covers wonderful and bizarre topics. And we also are going to have a couple other national talk shows here that will be supplementing what we do here at Nuganomics.com. And have you seen the story? I think it was in the paper a couple days ago. It kind of went past me. I didn't mention it, and I didn't really read it, but I got caught up with it today by going to tcog.info, which is the website of a group that is concerned about open government. It's the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, a nonprofit group. And there's a post about a local woman named Rebecca Little, and she has been received a favorable ruling on a lawsuit she had to file to gain access to open records. And the thing I want to mention here is the good faith, bad faith question. And to try to boil this down, she was involved in getting records about sewer and other improvements in her part of town that was annexed in 1972. And she believes that there was not sufficient service for annexation, and so she was involved in effectively the anti-annexation idea and movement. There is a movement afoot here in Chattanooga and in the legislature to block forced annexations, where people in a county become a member of a new corporation. That is to say, they're annexed into a municipal corporation and have then ostensibly benefits, but also taxes that come. And so Rebecca Little was involved in gaining records, and the city government refused to cooperate. And there was an appeal. She was told no. There was a case that was appealed, sent back to the lower court, then appealed again. And the question of good faith I bring up because good faith is what government has as its protection. Government can act in good faith, even though it tramples all over your rights, even though it mangles local economy, it mangles constitutional rights that you have. If it does it in good faith, then there's no harm done. You lose, you've been offended, you've been strip searched, as that woman was in LaSalle County, Illinois, by 3 men and a woman officer. She had done nothing wrong. She had been harassed for a DUI charge, and she was thrown down, stripped, thrown into a room, stripped of all her clothing, left there naked, according to the video that I saw this morning, and then someone threw unceremoniously a cloth in or a blanket. And good faith is what, if these officers were acting in good faith, not intending to do any wrong, but if it can be shown that they were acting innocently or ignorantly, they can have the good faith defense. Now, what we have to do as people who love liberty is to show that they're acting in bad faith. Okay, bad faith strips away immunity. Bad faith, the showing of bad faith, strips away personal protection of a man who is acting under color of law only, acting in his own personal capacity against you, my listener, against your rights. So, in a nutshell, the story from this open government website, and that was in the paper a couple of days ago about Rebecca Little, is that the government Chattanooga City Corporation and its staff did not act in good faith. The good faith argument is, let me just tell you what the good faith argument was. We acted in good faith because there was confusion over her request. There was the absence of the woman in the city attorney's office charged with handling public records requests. She had taken time off to study for the bar exam and had missed several days of work in July. And her backup not taking over as anticipated. The ball was dropped, according to Chancery Judge Brown, when he sided with the city, saying that there was not bad faith, and that the city therefore didn't have to pay her legal fees. But this went up and down. Judge John McClarty was involved in an earlier iteration of this case, but then finally it was ruled again. This is a very, very aggressive plaintiff. It was ruled again that bad faith was involved, not just mishap, not just good faith oversights, right? But it was a whole process of bad faith that had delayed the city's obedience of the law for a couple of years, essentially. The city has 9 days to provide records on an information request, and this was months and months and months in the waiting. It was bad faith, and so bad faith is something we need to understand is on our side. And that you establish bad faith by the good people by giving them administrative notice of the facts of the law that applies to a particular matter in dispute. We've talked about that before, and I've run out of time. This is David Toulis. Our show is Nuganomics.com. Contact me through my website, Nuganomics.com. Send me an email. Tell me if there's anything I need to talk with you about. I'd love to hear from you, and I will get back to you. The name is David Toulis. We're Nuganomics.com.
Good show.
Well, thank you. Oh.
Come on, stop broadcast and stop recording.
Here comes Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's got third. He's going for second. Earnhardt going for the lead. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series is on.